At the end of the 1800s, reformers tried to improve public schools. They thought it was important for young people to go to school so they could get ready for work and become good citizens. They also thought that a person's economic and social status could change if they went to school. At that time, not many kids in the US went to school. Some didn't go at all, and those who did generally left after only 4 years. Between 1865 and 1895, states passed regulations that said kids aged 8 to 14 had to go to school for at least 3 months each year. By the year 1900, almost 2/3 of American kids that age were going to school. They learned to read, write, and do math at school. A lot of people didn't like how schools worked. They didn't like that students had to remember things they didn't really understand and that some teachers weren't very good. The strict rules and physical punishments made many students unhappy. As the 1900s started, there were a lot more schools than before. More kindergartens and high schools were built. In fact, by 1900, more than 500,000 people were going to high school. Science, government, and social studies were added to the high school curriculum, among other things. People understood that the new industrial age needed workers with technical and management skills. So high schools started teaching drafting, mechanics, and business. White communities were affected by these changes to public schooling more than anyone else. African American kids had fewer chances to go to school. Only 34% of African American children went to elementary school in the late 1880s, and less than 1% went to high school. But there were people like Mary McLeod Bethune who worked to give African Americans more chances to go to school. She started a school for African American girls, which later became Bethune-Cookman College and welcomed both boys and girls. On the other hand, a large number of immigrants went to school. Some parents thought that school would help their kids become more American. Even adults who came to the United States as immigrants took classes at night to learn about American society and English. Some employers even had daytime classes to help their workers learn more about American culture. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, most Americans did not go to college. Only about 2% of the people in the country were able to go to college, but during this time, things began to change. To meet the needs of the growing business world, colleges started to offer a bigger range of courses. They taught things like modern languages, physical science, psychology, and sociology. Law schools and medical schools also started to open. After the Civil War, a growing number of African Americans who had been freed started going to college. Between 1865 and 1868, universities like Howard, Atlanta, and Fisk were set up with help from groups like the Freedmen's Bureau. But many private schools still didn't let African American kids in. Donors also found it hard to give money to African American college graduates and meet the needs of their communities at the same time. Booker T. Washington took a different method when he started the Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute, which is now Tuskegee University. He thought that racism would go away over time as African Americans learned useful skills and became important parts of society. Washington made sure that his college taught these skills. Webb Du Bois, who was an African American professor, did not agree with Washington's ideas. The Niagara movement was started by Du Bois. He was the first black person to get a PhD from Harvard. This movement pushed for African Americans to get a liberal arts education because they thought it would help them become well-educated leaders for the black community.